Welcome to the Blizzard Sound Panel. Please join us in welcoming to the stage Russell Brower, Director of Audio and Composer at Blizzard Entertainment.
Panel. It's always the sound panel that has the sound problem. Welcome to BlizzCon 2011 Sound Panel. Thank you so much for being here. We've talked about Warcraft the last few years and played a lot of that music and stuff, but I wonder, Lawrence, what should we feature today? Lawrence Juber, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the composers on Diablo III. The first Blizzard game I ever played was Diablo I, long before I ever knew I might have a chance of working here. So this has been quite an honor to work on this really special project. And to show you the various elements that go into making the soundscape of this project, we want to roll a little video for you. This is a reduced version of what you're going to see in the collector's edition very soon. So please roll the video.
When you go into a Diablo game, you need to feel it, and the sound is a huge part of how you perceive the game.
Diablo III is really exciting because we know that we're going to have the time to draw you in and take you on a journey.
Mood of the game is very important from an audio standpoint. It's everything. It has to be in an environment that just feels lush and cool and dark and dirty and dank and smelly. It's got to stink. The audio has to smell bad. I like every game that I work on to have its own signature sound, and really the only way to do that is to go out and create the material for that specific title. Fortunately, Blizzard allows us to go out into the desert and light stuff on fire.
Pickle hot? All right, here we go.
Heroes like fire, so do the people who work on the heroes. Make sounds for them. Yeah. That's an interesting method that we've used over the years, and I'm still perfecting it, and occasionally it goes wrong and doesn't work out. But we're always rolling tape when it does happen.
Are you okay, dude?
I'm fine.
Let's go get some beer.
It is nothing compared to the Grand Maesters. It is named Akonesh, the Herald of Righteousness. A sharper blade was never forged.
This is perhaps the biggest voice undertaking we've done at Blizzard so far. I think that StarCraft II had about 3,000 lines, but currently our estimate for Diablo III is anywhere from 13,000 to 16,000 lines. The easy part is identifying the voice. The hardest, more challenging part is identifying who the character is. Because for us, once we're in the recording studio, they do come to life and they are very real.
This is about as exciting as the time Uncle Deckard and I spent the summer in Bramwell.
You're not very good at lifting the spirits of others, are you?
Does the soul stone shatter?
Do the demon lords break free?
Diablo's essence was finally trapped in a soul stone and banished to the unfathomable abyss.
And I really think that voiceover is like kids playing in a room together, because suddenly you're just there, you're having fun, you're letting your imaginations go, so nothing has to match anything. And I think what I love most about voiceover is suddenly, after all this work, all this talk, after all this searching for this actor, this voice, right in front of your eyes, boom, all of it comes together. You don't see that actor anymore. When you get it right, you really are tapping into something bigger, whereby you are channeling your male demon hunter, for example, and it's pretty exciting.
That is not a demon's way. They prefer to torture, to taste their victims' terror. Poison is far too civilized for them.
In recording the orchestral music for Diablo III, one of the basic tenets we had was we want this game to sound completely different than World of Warcraft and StarCraft. What we're doing with Diablo is we're recording in an old-fashioned concert hall. This is a hall that was designed for live performance and not for studio recording. So it's a vast space. There's a lot of volume of air. It's our responsibility as musicians to move as much as possible to make this sound, you know, epic and bold. If the most ancient form of music is for other people to hear in a live situation, then maybe it follows that the concert hall is the best environment to hear music that's supposed to be as timeless can be.
I want to introduce you to the best audio team on the planet, starting with the lead sound designer of Diablo III, Joseph Lawrence. And composer, Derek Duke. Sound designer extraordinaire, Chris Giampa. Composer and founder of the sound department, Mr. Glenn Stafford. Sound designer, Mike Johnson. And casting and voiceover director of Blizzard Entertainment, Andrea Toyas. Staging, plotting. Sound people are terrible at that. Well, this is the team, and Joseph, I'd love for you to speak about how you've provided the continuity because you worked on Diablo II. So we have an original Diablo audio team member here. How did you bridge this gap into Diablo III?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to let everyone know how psyched we are to have you all here, because this has been a really, really long trip for many of us to get here today, and we're really happy to be sharing this with you today, and a little bit about the story of how we made the audio for Diablo III. I'm joined up here by some extremely talented people who it's a privilege to work with every day, and they've just done some amazing work that we're really, really happy and excited to get you guys playing it as soon as possible, and we really think we've created an awesome sound design environment for you guys to run around and kill monsters in. And before I go on, I just wanted to share with you, or actually send some thank yous out to some people who really never, ever get to come on stage and do anything like this. And that's our awesome production staff, and especially Keith Landis and Dennis Crabtree and the entire guys back at the office. Thanks, guys. So, as you can see from the video, we really like to get out and get our hands dirty and burn our arms. And we like to really record a lot of the material that we put in the game as much as possible. It's really what makes the game special, we think. And so I'm just going to relate a couple of incidents that occurred, not all good, out in the field while we were grabbing sounds. We'll start with a bread and butter one. We drove a bulldozer over a car. That was pretty fun. Actually, if you're a doctor, I think you have to go to school for 7 years, and you still don't get to drive a bulldozer over a car, unless you pay extra, I guess. Another time, we use a lot of pig sounds for monsters. They're really, really great for doing that. And I found this awesome pig rescue farm up in Solvang, and they have about 150 pigs up there. And so we were grabbing a bunch of pig sounds and sorry. And so the pig lady, sorry pig lady, I can't remember your name. She was awesome. She goes, "You want to record this pig that plays the guitar?" I said, "Yeah, I want to record that." So she brings the guitar out, and she sets it on the ground, puts her foot on, and the pig walks right over. That's how pigs walk. And he just starts strumming the guitar. So I got that, but I haven't found a place to put it in the game yet. So maybe some of you who are going to the other D3 panels today could talk Jay Wilson into maybe creating a secret guitar-playing pig level or something. Help me out. I want to use that. You know, the arm on fire, other things that have caught on fire in a microphone, that kind of ended the day. The last thing I'm going to tell you about, really it's more like therapy than relating a story for me. It scarred me, for good. I was recording a llama chewing, and I had the microphone right up in his face, and he was making this really awesome chewing sounds. And it was golden. I knew it. I knew we were going to be able to use it for something. And suddenly, out of nowhere, without warning or provocation, this llama hawked up the biggest, greenest, giant llama Satan loogie all over me and my mic and my face and my hands. It was disgusting. I was in shock. Has anybody ever seen the first Jurassic Park movie where the little kids get sneezed on by the big dinosaur? Yeah, well, that happened to me.
Have you used it in the game?
Yeah, that's in the game. I'm not saying where. So, I hate llamas. Part of the reason I'm telling you all this is because that kind of stuff, even when things go wrong, is really what makes the game super special, and it plays a huge role in everything we do, and I think you're really going to hear all that extra work that we've done over the years to put all that kind of stuff in the game. So now I'm gonna turn it over to the panelists, and we're gonna just ask them all questions and find out a little bit about what everybody does, and hopefully you guys can learn a bit more about the sound in Diablo. So let's see. I told everyone I'd surprise them. Who should I pick? Let's pick the pretty one on the end. So this is Andrea. She's our awesome voice director. She kicks a serious amount of buttocks. And so, Andrea, you work on all of our games, and how does the voice in Diablo differ from the work that you have to do in say, WoW and StarCraft?
Is this on? Thank you for asking, Joseph. That's a great question. First of all, I'd much rather be on the other side of the mic. This is very uncomfortable for me. I'm not. There's a reason I direct and don't act, is because a microphone intimidates me. So be kind. Before I answer that question, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you, because I know that all of us tremendously love and enjoy what we do. And I know that we're all pretty geeked out to be here. So for me personally, voiceover is epic and fantastic. And I can't believe I have this job and I get to do it. So to think that those of you here are here to find out about what we do is really exciting. So I know there's other cool things going on. So I just want to give a huge thank you to each of you for being here, because I'm ridiculously geeked out to be here right now. I love talking about voiceover, so I'm going to warn you, you're going to have to pull this microphone out of my hand, because I can talk about it for hours. So D3, the VO, as I think I alluded to in the video there, we had about 16,000 plus lines to record. And that is tremendously different than, say, WoW or Star 2, because each of those had about 3,000 lines or so. So for me, to really have that opportunity to dive into the lore, the characters, their arc, their emotions, was phenomenal. Each of the hero characters had about 1,200 lines, I think, which meant versus, let's say, in WoW, where the player characters have maybe 300, I can't carry that, I can't do that yet. Our heroes in Diablo had a whole range of emotional lines to read. So to have the opportunity to work with a team of writers to figure out how each of our player class is going to respond, how they feel, and to really dive into the character was really a unique opportunity to bring the emotional landscape of the game to life in a way that we've not done before. And it was really moving. You know, this game is heavy. I think we all know that. There's some pretty heavy storylines and epic character arcs that happen. So to work with the characters on that and the actors was great. You know, for example, the demon hunters, they had a lot of tragedy in their life. So they're kind of walking around Tristram all pissed off. Whereas the witch doctor is a bit more zen and has empathy for the zombies, if you can believe it. So to be able to play with characters like that and create their emotional response to the game was really amazing. And it really got to the point where the player characters, we had about 20 sessions with them. And so by the end of it, they were dreaming as the demon hunter and the monks and so forth. And they would come into the studio and have their own opinions on what the character thought, who they are, and how they would react. So to build these, I call the characters people, because by the end of it, they became people. And they had thoughts and concerns and emotions and reactions that any of us would. So to have 16,000 lines to work with was amazing. The other thing I want to point out, and I'll stop talking, is that we worked really hard to really populate the land of D3 with a lot of what we call incidental roles, meaning female villager 2, soldier 3, barkeep, etc. So we spent a lot of time finding just the right voice so that every person you interact with is really going to have a personality. They're not random voice in the background. Each little background role could have a story. They each have their emotions. So my point is to really work and have this many lines to work with and this much time and opportunity to create such an epic game so that you can really immerse yourself in the game and experience it and be there with them was really critical for us. So for me, that was the biggest benefit for D3 and how it varied from the other games, is to have that much content to play with.
Thanks, Andrea. So, Mike, I hear there's monsters in Diablo 3.
Hi. Yes. Hello.
Do you work on those by any chance?
I am one of the lucky few that is creating content for creatures on Diablo 3, yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your process for creating monster sounds?
Okay. Can I start with a survey first?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So how many people in the audience like monsters? Okay, that's pretty good. How many people in the audience like killing monsters? There you go. Okay, so do I. Well, you're going to get plenty of opportunity to do just that in Diablo 3 because we have 60 unique creature types in the game so far. So I just have to say, like with Andrea, I'm just a big geek when it comes to Diablo as well. I played Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, and when I was playing it 10 years ago, I actually applied to Blizzard North and didn't get the job. So, you know, perseverance pays off, and now here I am. It's kind of like a dream come true, actually working for Blizzard and working on the creatures that I liked so much in Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. So we had big shoes to fill. There were some great sounds in those games, and we had to not only meet the caliber of those games, but also in Blizzard fashion to also raise the bar as well. So talk about some of the things that we do. One of the things that we do work as a team. So besides Joseph and Chris and I that are on stage, we also have a couple guys as well, Dave Roven and Evan Chen, working on creatures as well. I didn't want to leave them out. So one of the other things that we do, kind of like 3 different ways we kind of create monsters. It all depends whether they're kind of like humanoid based or whether or not they were humans at one time and transform into something else, or things that aren't based on human physiology at all, or any combination of the above. But one of the big things to have is to have a really good anchor sound that you can have as form as the basis of any creature. And the first thing that we did was actually work with Andrea to actually get a short list of actual specialized voice actors that really work on making creature vocalizations. So Andrea gave us a list of all these people that she knew from her Rolodex that actually do make really good creature sounds. And one by one, we called them, we worked together, looked at the animations of what the monsters were coming down the pipe, and decided who would have to be the best vocal fit for each of the monsters. And that was a process, because sometimes you'd like something and then you find out that person's already doing something else in the game on the same level, so you're probably like, well, I can't have this whole level having this guy doing every monster, because then they're all going to sound the same. So we kind of worked together to kind of divide up who we're going to use for which monster. But getting the vocalization from actors is really good. The second thing, which Joseph had talked about, was basically going out and collecting source material for monsters, for the monsters, like pigs and elephants, horses, goats, llamas, llama spit, llama.
I hate llamas.
Llama everything. Everything. Dogs, cats, pretty much everything. And then using that as a basis for a monster. So, and then the third thing we basically do is take a really good human character vocalization, and mix that with some element of an animal, and put those two elements together, and that would be a really good source for a creature. And then the other thing we could do from that is, let's say, well, we have a really good monster that really works great, but you really can't stick the microphone into in a VO booth and record a demon, because they really don't exist. So you try to get that person who does a really good demon vocalization, and then they have to be really big, so maybe you might put an elephant on there, but then you finally get the final artwork, and all of a sudden it's on fire. So it's like, oh, great. So we'll go out and record some fire, and then we'll layer all three of those things together, and we'll have a fire-breathing demon, for one of Diablo's minions that's coming to kill you. But anyway, I just want to say I really feel blessed to be here, and I'm like yourselves. Like, I work on the game, and I can't wait for this game to come out. So I think I'm done.
All right, way to go, Mike. Thanks. All right, Chris with a K.
That's me.
Chris has been doing some amazing work on the skills, and so Chris, I'd like to ask you, when you're creating sounds for the skills, how do you consider the player when you're doing your design on those?
Well, being a gamer at heart, I play a lot of games myself, and I can sit down and play long sessions of gaming, and audio can get kind of repetitive at times. So, being a gamer, I try to instill replayability and randomization as a sound designer. So to go about that, I will go into my digital audio workstation, and I will create a sound, and usually skills have anywhere from 3 types of sounds, like a cast, a projectile loop, and an impact. And within those 3 different categories, I'll then create variations upon each of those, anywhere from 5 to 10 or so. And then I will distill it down into distinct layers. I will organize it like that. And then at that point, half of my fun as a sound designer is implementation as well. So I get to spend a lot of time taking my own sounds, putting them in the game, and that's where I get into the randomization type of area. And within this, I can, when I go into setting the sound, say there's a cast sound or something like that, that sound can have anywhere from 1 to 3 layers, possibly. And within those 3 layers, I can then go in and set slight volume differences, pitch shifting, and I can set a small min and max range within this. So every time you play a sound, it'll play slightly different. And along with that, we can also add effects, like real-time effects, like low-pass filtering, EQs, distortion, and within those settings as well, I can then randomize those. So with all these things combined, and a lot of time spent implementing my own sounds, I can make it sound so it's not quite as repetitive all the time, and hopefully within each sitting of you guys playing, that you won't hear the same sound twice. It'll always sound a little different, and hopefully you guys will just keep playing longer and longer, because I expect you guys to be playing this game over and over and over. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Russell now so he can have a little chat with the guys who make the music for our games.
The music of Diablo III. Someone mentioned earlier about having big shoes to fill, and one of the things that struck me when I played Diablo I, though so many years ago, was that Matt Ullman, who wrote the original music, he did something that's very hard to do in this day and age. He created something original. He created something kind of unexpected, and it became iconic and just perfect. So in keeping with eclectic nature of the music that he created for the earlier games, we picked up that thread. We studied where he was going as he went into Diablo II and Diablo II expansion. We started hearing orchestral instruments, live orchestras. In fact, it was probably one of the earliest uses of live orchestra in a video game was in the Diablo series. And so, as I talked about in the video, we handled the recording of the orchestral portions in a completely different way than we have on the other projects. So even though it's a lot of the same composer faces you're used to up here, we tried to write differently, but we also recorded differently. And I went overseas and recorded this Irish choir called Anuna. And I got this Gaelic accent, a seductive, beautiful sound for the sounds of hell, because I thought hell should be pretty in a very strange way, seductive. With that, I wanted to ask my fellow composers here. I worked mainly on the cinematics, but we have Lawrence, we have Derek, and we have Glenn. And Glenn, I wanted to ask, because the sounds of the music of Diablo are so eclectic, it wasn't all orchestra, right? You used other things, you used other means. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, obviously orchestra was a big element of what we did, live orchestral instruments as well as synthesized and sampled instruments. I guess to touch a little bit on each phase of the composing process might be a good thing to outline where those interesting and unique sounds come from, because sometimes it's in the concepting and composing phase, sometimes it's later on. So maybe I'll touch a little bit on each one of those phases. The concepting phase is usually just mentally or listening to other people's music, listening to past music that we've done, identifying those unique textures. And one of my best music teachers told me, music is about setting a set of limitations. It's choosing a sound palette. The possibilities are endless, so you have to limit yourself or you'll never get anything done. So choosing the sound palette for Diablo is sometimes obvious, sometimes not. I think obviously guitar has been a huge part of it, and I had to embrace that in some of the stuff I wrote. Not necessarily in the same way as it was done for the past games, because I wanted to try to evolve it, and sometimes it's hard to write exactly like somebody else, obviously. That being said, yeah, in the concepting phase, I knew orchestra was a big element. I knew guitar would be there, and we also brought in some newer instruments. We had an electric a cellist named Tina Guo, she played here at BlizzCon last year. She's a fantastic classical cellist and electric cellist. She brought some really interesting textures and very heartfelt melodies and exotic melodies that just fit perfect in this universe, if you ask me. Lawrence played some fantastic guitar parts for some of the things I wrote that you'll hear in the later acts, which I can't talk about the acts so much, but the music itself. I wanted to say, so in the concepting phase, you have to know what you want. And moving on to the composing phase, choosing instruments that blend well together. Even in the orchestra, taking instruments that don't sometimes blend well together or that aren't the typical thing can be really interesting, especially the darker and lower strings and brass, and maybe do something interesting with a low woodwind that plays a high note mixed with something else that you wouldn't do typically. That, for me, that type of texture, it doesn't sound like the standard orchestra, and it lends itself to the Diablo universe. Moving on into the recording phase, obviously you get the best musicians you can. We got fantastic orchestra playing the stuff. The choir, both choirs are amazing. All that blended together in specific ways, and for me, I had to reach a little bit and stretch to try to do it in more unusual ways than I would do it for Warcraft, for example. I think in the mixing and post-production or production phase is where I would do a lot of the magic that didn't happen in the writing phase by taking and manipulating live recordings, I even got in there and used some guitar and other instruments to play some weird effects and things to just add to that texture. I took live recordings, maybe slowed them down to half speed or reversed them and slowed them down, blended them with other parts, and also tried to keep the whole thing more modular. A linear approach to music is one approach, and we would use that for a cinematic, for example. For the game, we wanted to be able to do more variation. So we have a layering system, and we have the ability to take the same content and implement it in any number of different ways and add a lot of variation that way. So, and I wanted to echo the sentiment of, thanking you all for coming out here. It's a great honor to be here and talk to our fans. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the show, and I'll hand you back to Russell now. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Well, you mentioned implementation. Chris mentioned implementation. There's this whole step of creating the sounds and then getting them into the game and triggering them and things like that. And for a composer, such as my colleague Derek Duke over here, do you find yourself composing for the machine, or do you find yourself focused on the gameplay, the story? I mean, what motivates you to create this music?
Well, it's always the gameplay, and the gameplay and the story are very, very much intertwined. Just to carry on what Glenn was talking about, one of the interesting aspects of Diablo is there's basically nothing that gets in music-wise that hasn't been processed in some way or another and gotten dirty or stinky, as Joseph likes to put it. So whether we're granularizing and stretching things and processing them, distorting them, pushing the orchestra so far back that you only hear the echo or the reverberation of it, or taking Joseph playing a trombone and slowing that down, or bowing a kalimba, or just collecting all sorts of waterphone sounds and transferring those and translating those into musical textures and musical design that, sort of, if you hear an instrument that there's something a little bit off and something different. It's not quite the same as you would encounter it in a normal world, because Diablo, while you've got a lot of things that we have in real life, like trees and grass, and like the whole universe, it's a different place. So by paying attention to the treatment of all the instruments that make up the music, that sort of, I think that really helps embed you into the world and is going to make your experience and the time that you live in the Diablo universe all the more special.
The music again in, thank you, Derek. the music again in Diablo 1, 2, and 2 expansion was so iconic and special. So I want you all to know that we paid great homage to that, especially in Act 1, because you start just outside New Tristram, and you're going to hear, you've probably heard some of it in the beta. I wish I had a lot of beta keys to throw out at you here. We studied what had come before. We also had about 90 minutes of recordings of Matt Ullman playing guitar and riffing on the original Diablo guitars and calling out what different things were in his mind, you know, for different sections. And so that's one of the things that I got to do in addition to the cinematic music, was to take that guitar work plus some stuff that Lawrence had done and kind of make this pastiche, this tapestry to take you through New Tristram. So now I want to talk a little bit about Lawrence. So Lawrence, I did call Paul McCartney and told him to leave you alone so that we could have full-time use of you. From Wings to Diablo III, we have Lawrence Juber. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thanks. You know, I saw myself as kind of the bridge from Matt's guitaristic stuff into the new version of it. And what was important for me was to maintain the continuity of that 12-string guitar-driven texture. And the voice of the 12-string is just so important. So, because I use a lot of altered tunings on my guitar work, what I did was, in places I would, instead of playing it in a regular standard tuning, I would retune the guitar. Let's say here I've got C, G, D, G, A, D, which gives me a very dark, kind of orchestrated texture to it. And then I would further layer and create texture by using other double-strung plucked instruments like mandolin, octave mandolin, Renaissance lute, also the hammer dulcimer, which is a very spooky and characteristic sound, and just try and build a lot of texture and make it, as much as I could, unpredictable, so that repetition wouldn't become kind of boring, but would keep like unearthing new things through the different layers. So, and I also took, I mean, we have the original kind of those chords, but there's also melodic elements like there's that element, so bringing that into the texture. And just going in odd harmonic places and just kind of creating this ambience. It was really, it was just a pleasure to get so immersed into something.
Super awesome.
Thank you.
Lawrence Juber, everyone. So you got to get the collector's edition. You got to get the soundtrack. And you saw on the video there that big giant stage. Yes, we played the pipe organ. It's the heavens did tremble. It's good stuff. I want to thank this incredible panel, this best sound department on the planet in the industry. Do you guys have any thoughts you want to add before we open it up to Q&A? Anyone? Andrea? Joseph?
Russell, I had one thing I wanted to say, and that is, I'm in awe of the team I work with, but even when I approach voiceover, hearing all of them talk about their sound assets and the sound design and the music, even when I do voiceover, I think about how are my voices going to fit into this landscape? What's the tone of, I have D3 music and samples and so forth on my iPod that I play in the car because I really am cognizant of the sound sphere of the game. So I think all of our units, everything that we do really comes together beautifully because we all kind of work in harmony to create that kind of gestalt and vibe and energy that we're after.
We also took the music as we completed various sections over the last few years since the announcement in Paris and fed that music to the team so that the actual development team would get all geeked up on it too. So that was a lot of fun. One last thing I want to mention that I think is a really proud moment for music in video games is that when we announced Diablo III at the Worldwide Invitational in Paris, we didn't do it with video or a speech or anything. Mike Morheim just came up on stage and said, we'd like to present Blizzard's newest game. And the lights went down to black and then they came up red with Lawrence was on the stage and he played those opening chords. That was the first clue anyone had was the music, and it was unmistakable. Everyone knew exactly what game it was, and there was something like 12,000 people in that room, and they just blew the roof off of it. So for a game to be able to be identified by a chord of music is really, really cool.
That was a scary moment for me.
Well, I think we have just the perfect time here to take some questions. So are we set up for that?
Yes, indeed we are.
Okay, fire away.
Step right up.
Hello. I'd first of all like to say that the orchestral theme for Diablo III has been my ringtone on my phone since it first came out. So thank you for that. And also, I'm in the beta, so I've been able to hear the sound and hear the music and hear the wonderful voice acting. And I really appreciate the fact that all the lore is audible. I don't have to stop gameplay to read the text or to hear what quest I'm on next. It's so nice to have everything just from an audio standpoint. It makes having really good headphones an awesome part of the game. So thank you guys very much for the effort and the you know, just the beautiful quality of work you all put into it. So thank you guys. I'm looking forward to the finished game like no business.
We worked pretty hard actually working with the designers to actually get the lore to be something that just wasn't getting in the way of the game. If you wanted to stop and listen to it, you could. If you wanted to keep killing stuff, which most people do, you can. And you can still come back to it later if you need to. So thanks for noticing.
I just got a job with making sounds and music for a game, and one of the things that had come up in the development...
Congratulations.
What? Thanks.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm really happy about it. But one of the things that came up in the development was open source sounds, and I know that World of Warcraft has a lot of these open source familiar sounds. When is it appropriate to use them? When is it not appropriate to use them? And does it ever get to a point where you're taking these sounds and changing them?
Well, you know, the reality of it is that we create as much material as we can. We really like everything to be completely original, but there always isn't time to make everything from scratch. But if we do use something, we always tweak it beyond recognition. You'll never hear a stock sound just thrown in the game, and it's been layered with 10 billion other things, and it's just part of the mix. So you'll never hear something right off a disc, never. I mean, that's a point of pride. I couldn't do it.
My rule of thumb for that is if you do use anything like that, take it and mangle it and just reuse it. Make it something different than what it was originally.
On a technical level, I've noticed that you're using a combination of a SND file, OGG, and a couple other formats within the game. How do these different formats relate to each other within the game environment in terms of playback?
I believe this man has violated his terms of use.
Yeah, are we allowed to answer that question? Well, basically, we use OGG files because we actually like the way they sound on music better than any other type of compression. They are more expensive in the decompression phase, so we don't use that for everything because it's just too hard on the engine. So we just basically use that for the music, and I think the ambience as well. It just sounds better. We like the sound better on music. Everything else, the sound effects are typically 80 PCM. So
there are elements of the music in the gameplay music where we have a layering system where there might be several tracks of music, and then there'll be related musical elements that come in according to random rules structured. So quite often, if you were to find some music in the Mopac, you may not be hearing the whole thing because some of the music is intended to be heard with overlays on top. So we do have a layering system in place for the music.
So I was going to ask, in the previous two games, especially the first Diablo, a lot of the soundtrack included a lot of, I'd say, ambient sounds like moaning, groaning, sighing. There's that great squishy sound when you'd kill Hidden. Were you able to include some things like that in this game, or?
Well, actually, there is a ton of that kind of stuff. We went out of our way, and we're not actually done doing it, so there's some in the beta, but there will be more in the first act when we ship. We created a lot of spots all over the game. You'll find this everywhere, where you could go stand for 20 minutes and not hear anything. And then maybe the next time you stand there, you'll hear a bunch of creature noises off in the distance. And we've got that kind of randomization all over the game so that maybe by the time you play the game through the third time, which somebody might do that.
Yeah, there's lots of goodies hidden in, I know for sure, in the music tracks that, did I hear that? And there's no way for you when you're playing to actually rewind the soundtrack. So you're going to have to keep playing for another couple days before you can ever verify that what you really heard wasn't a hallucination.
Was that a jaw harp I heard?
Was that a machine gun? No.
Hi, my name is Rob. I'm an aspiring sound designer for video games. This question is for Russell and Chris. You guys were talking about implementation of sound effects in the video game. I just got finished making a Flash game with a 4-person team, and I had to do a lot of my sound work over and over again by their request, by the artist's request, because my sound effects did not match the length of the little animatic of when an enemy died or when they shot something. I was wondering what the relationship is between a sound designer and an artist, because you talked about making like different 5 to 10 variations of a certain sound effect as far as length. Like, did artists ever tell you to go back and do something again because something didn't match as far as length or intensity?
Usually that would be QA who comes out and says that it's off sync or something like that. We do work very closely with the artists at times. And basically, we just kind of, just mess around and get things going. So, you want to fill in for that?
Well, I think Blizzard has a culture of iteration, so it's no different for the sound department. So, I think when you're working in this field, you need to be ready to tweak and tweak again, and then again, sometimes QA is what catches it, because after the sound and everything is left our desk, if you will, the artist might go back and tweak something. And I think another dimension to what you might be talking about too is, I think a lot of really effective sound design happens when the mass, the weight feels right. It's really easy when you're recording source material, especially in a quiet studio, to actually have it either not sound big enough or maybe sound too thumpy or something that just the human brain's pretty powerful computer, and it can tell you subconsciously that it isn't quite hooking up. There's something often wrong with that sense of weight or mass, and so that's always really tricky. And there is an analogy to that in the visual arts. You talk to special effects people, and they say, they make fake rocks for the movies because real rocks look fake and fake rocks look real on films. Well, it's often the same kind of thing that happens with sound.
One last thing I'd like to say is to keep it more granular and more individual sounds. And if it's a flash game or something like that, you'll probably have individual timings of when these things fire off. Instead of doing a full soundtrack, that's how things kind of get out of sync a lot of the time. So the more granular it is, or if you know if something is going to loop, keep it looping until needs to be turned off. And usually that's all handled in the data side. So try and keep it as minute as possible, as granular as possible. And that helps a lot in the end, because then they can just move those timings around too, and it doesn't become your job to do that all the time as well.
Cool. Get a few more in here.
Hi, I'm also a sound engineer. I have a compression limiting question. I've always found in the Blizzard games, you guys run like 3 tracks, and they're all gorgeously compressed. And I've always wondered how you deal with final limiting and get it where you can blend all these tracks, yet I can still hear every whisper in every track, and then there's a loud track, and the limiting never peaks or is clipped. It's always gorgeous. So any advice about compression and limiting, I would love.
I just want to say that is a master compliment, and we appreciate that with all our hearts. Thank you. I'll let the guys speak to the compression and limiting, but I know one thing that I do in mixing the music is I work at very low volumes when I'm mixing, because at a low playback level, if you can hear the bass and the treble and the mid-range and the melody and it's all there, even at a level that you can easily speak over and have a conversation over, chances are it'll sound good when you turn it up to face melting levels, which eventually we do, but there's all that. I think that reference listening level is really important to be consistent. As far as compression, maybe, I don't know, anything else anyone want to add?
Well, I should say, in the form of the game, it's good to leave plenty of headroom back at runtime. So you don't necessarily have to compress everything a lot. I like to compress things when I want to make it really aggressive and big and in your face. And when we go into the game and implement this stuff, nothing is at 0 dB. Not a lot of it's at 0 dB. We leave a lot of headroom in there so you have high dynamics and things can really jump out at you. So that's what I try and go for.
The audio world is weird. 0 is loudest.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, and thank you very much. I am a student who's getting ready to graduate in 5 weeks with music business sound engineering emphasis. And I'm also an opera singer and do voiceover, so I'm curious how much there is a crossover with you guys as an entire team for the artists who do the speaking voiceovers with pig sounds and as well as the music making. How much crossover is there?
It's Andrea's question.
I'll start off. As I kind of alluded to earlier, way before we even get into the studio, when we're in the casting process, actually before casting, when I'm working with the dev teams and we're talking about voices, I do pull up the kind of music work in progress. Again, before we even find our actors and start working on that, I want to hear what they're doing. I want to hear, because I'm really into music, I love sound, and so when I hear their work in progress, it really sets the tone. It sounds kind of goofy, but I really do get into my headspace, even when if I'm going to go through auditions, let's say I get in hundreds for each character that we do, before I even review the auditions, I will sit at my desk with headphones on and really listen to what they're working on musically, because it really, anybody who loves music knows you just get those sounds in your head and you're in a different place. So for me, for my part of it, I really do, and it's especially hard for me, not hard, but because I work on Star 2 and WoW, it's important that I do listen to their assets, because I need to clear my head of WoW, clear my head of Star 2, and really readjust and get into the D3 world. So hence I really rely on their music a lot to get me there so I can find the perfect voices for our characters. So in that way, that's how I collaborate.
You also worked with a really, actually we all worked with a really incredible voice actor named D. Baker, who can make the most unhuman sounds. And actually, I believe the sound designers were directing those sessions, yes?
Well, D. Baker did some work prior to me working at Blizzard for the Fallen family that Joseph can probably talk about a little bit.
Well, D is an amazing talent. He can stand in front of you and make noises with his mouth that don't sound like they're coming from a human, and it's kind of scary. He'll put objects in his mouth, he'll put his fingers in his mouth, he will do whatever it takes to make a really strange noise, and it's just amazing working with him because he's game for anything, and he can just about pull anything off. It's really quite stunning.
So that's that crossover between found sounds for creatures and then using the power of the human voice. And I suggest you maybe hunt his name down on YouTube, because if you can find some footage of him doing his thing, it's mind-blowing. I think, is he in the collector's edition DVD
Yes, he
video?
is. You'll see him in the collector's edition.
Excellent.
I love your shirt, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Very cool.
Next.
We have time for just a few more questions.
First of all, thank you guys all so much for making sounds an experience unto itself in the games. I really appreciate it. This question is for the composers. How much do you balance collaboration between each other on your own individual pieces in the game, starting through the conceptual phase through all the way to the finished product?
Well, I think we all have complementary talents. There's some overlap of our areas of speciality, but there are so we do some internal casting that maybe one person's tends to do the more heavy stuff, or maybe someone does the more humorous stuff. But we also have to contend with the fact that Blizzard's a real busy studio, so sometimes it comes down to which one of us is available. So some magic formula of the right person for the right job based on our individual strengths and our availability, because there's always a WoW patch to work on, and of course, Heart of the Swarm's coming. So
we talk a bit amongst ourselves quite often. We try and get together, whether it's in the hallway or structured meetings, but whether it's a year before the next WoW expansion, we might have some conversations about that. Whether it's for the next StarCraft 2, we're always talking about things like that, or even in a team meeting where we're talking about all sound-related things. Musical ideas come up, so we just try and keep the conversation open.
it was also clear on this one that it made great sense to bring Lawrence in, because we wanted to explore things that we didn't know guitars or related instruments could do. And I think Lawrence spent half his income on this game on crazy new instruments.
Yeah, I got into some really interesting things, just to, especially like the hammer dulcimer and stuff like that, to get all that extra dimension in the texture. But I gather my next job is to give guitar lessons to a pig. Is that the is that the plan?
And I was kidding. You don't have to ever twist a guitar player's arm to buy more gear. Next.
This is going to be our last question.
So to start off, when you when you were doing the Wrath of the Lich King, there's one sound in the Nexus. It's for the soundtrack. It was pulled straight out of Age of Empires 3, and I love that because I heard this iconic sound. I think it was like spawning some unit, and it perfectly matched with the music, and it just gave me kind of nostalgia for other old games that are also just fantastic. You guys, we're right in the same level of, if not better. And my question is, when you're doing layering, especially the music layering for battles versus just ambient, how do you structure that? Like, what's your theory behind it so that it's not going to be too jarring and not too impossible for them to work through and keep going on the level?
Well, I guess there's different approaches in the different IPs in Diablo 3, since we're talking about that. There's one boss fight right now in the beta, and that's a Skeleton King. What you'll find in the approach to a lot of the boss music is it's more of a game component, where it's meant to increase the tension and increase the anxiety of fighting the boss, rather than like, you better hit, we're gonna get the boss, it's more like, oh no, the boss is coming, here it is, it's more like, oh man, can somebody turn the music off, it's confusing me, I gotta kill the Skeleton King. So it's just the context that the game places for us calls for a certain approach, a certain kind of music. That makes any sort of sense in my crazy way.
Everyone, we have to close. I wanted to say again, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And keep playing Blizzard games. Enjoy Diablo 3 very soon.